Speaker Matt Huffman and Representative Brian Stewart, welcome back to Message from the House.
Great to be back.
Awesome to be here.
We launched this podcast with you both talking about the operating budget. Now we're here to talk about the capital budget. So I will kick it off with Speaker Huffman. Just kind of talk me through what is the capital budget for folks that don't know.
So typically in even numbered years, there is a capital budget. And capital in this sense simply means things we can touch, buildings, roads, a whole number of other things. And we generally spend, depending on what we have and what the needs are, between $3.5 to $4 billion on this. And so these are things, for example, like K-12 school buildings. This bill has about $600 million for new money that the state will take and put under formula just for the new buildings. We have, the state owns a lot of property, a lot of buildings here in downtown Columbus, other places. One of the big spends is in higher education on our several state institutions. One of the ones that gets a lot of interest from locals, but is really a pretty small part of this budget, $200 million, is what we call community projects. And these are typically projects that, after input from locals, are suggested by various legislators. So there's a lot to sort out, and that's why we put our best man on it, Brian Stewart.
Yeah, arguably the man behind the budget. I want to ask, nearly $4 billion in capital investments. What would you say, Representative Stewart, were the priorities, and how did you go about this process?
Well, I've always enjoyed the capital budget as a member. Even when I was a county commissioner beforehand, we knew that this is kind of one of our best opportunities to get some of that state money back locally. And I like to remind some of our members, the voters have gone to the ballot time and time again and reauthorized and said through their vote that they want us to do this. They want to bring some of that money and as the speaker said, work on some of those tangible nuts and bolts, brick and mortar projects in, downtown, small town, not just the major metros. So, we're excited about the fact that we are investing in higher ed. We are investing in our schools, but I think our members are really excited to bring that money back locally. We have projects in all 88 counties. We have a great split between our urban and rural pots of money. We prioritized, fairgrounds projects, theaters, parks, the things that when we go out in the budget and we try to, create a financial pitch to keep kids in Ohio and to attract people to Ohio. We know that people want amenities. People want things in the community that they can do, they can take their kids to, that kind of put Ohio on the map. And we have a lot of those things here. Sometimes we need to do a better job at kind of selling those things, but investing in the Cleveland Museum of Art, investing in, downtown Columbus at the Ohio Theater, investing in Cincinnati to have a massive, music venue right on the Ohio River. I mean, these are the kind of things that people are excited to have here, and we won't have them if we don't support them. And that's what we get to do in this budget.
And I want to ask, for folks that don't know, how long has this process been, right? This wasn't 2 weeks, a month of, okay, let's put together a capital budget and delegate, how many members? So talk through the process.
Yeah, I would say we generally started the process back in February, where we sort of start to put together the bones of what the budget's going to be. Then we go to members in March and say, this is how much we're looking to spend. We've been telling our members, but our members have been working these projects in some cases for a year and a half. They know the capital budget is coming. And so we're always telling people, be in your community, understand what asks are going to come to you, make sure that you're helping your locals make good pitches. Most of the projects that we're funding here almost all of them have a local match, right? So you have a city, village, county, township that has said, we're going to dig deep and, have some local skin in the game. We just need that extra help to get the project over the finish line. And our members have done a good job at sort of making sure those projects are ready to go. And that makes our job easy. But through March and April, we're soliciting those projects, vetting them, making sure they meet all the legal requirements. And then from May and from basically May 1st till today, we're kind of whittling down a very big list, a more manageable list, talking with our friends in the Senate, making sure that both lists can match, and making those fine-tuned adjustments. So I think I just had a baby, and I think about 90 minutes before the baby came, we did our last little revision to make sure that all the zeros balanced with each other. And it's been really fun to work on.
Yeah, well, I would just add in some of these cases, these are capital projects which have spanned over several capital budgets. May have a project which may be several $1,000,000. We do try to get local matches in general. Some of those, by the way, are private contributions, not just what a local political entity may put forward. But they accumulate money in capital budgets over 8 or 10 or 12 years, because there's not enough money in a particular capital budget. So the legislator who is there, sometimes it's a new legislator, and the local folks come and say, well, we've got $500,000 in the last three budgets. If we can get the last 500, we can make this project go. So there's Brian aptly described the local or the recent work, but for some of us who've been around for a few years, these are accumulating projects.
And I want to quickly bring up the Senate bill and the House bill were identical. So, it seems like a lot of the negotiating or the working through the process happens, during the process. Speaker and Rep. Stewart talk about how that's just a testament to, the process and working together.
Well, I think the speaker's leadership of the chamber and the relationship we have with our friends in the Senate has made this easier, I think, than what I've kind of observed in some other times. It's we started out, Chairman Serino and I, we get along really well. We like each other. We've had good negotiations, and we kind of were able to start out and kind of set some rules together. I really try to elevate as few things as possible that we couldn't resolve to the speaker and the president, and I think we kind of did that again. It's like we were able to make a lot of progress and agree on more than we disagreed. We had some give and take on what the size of the pot was going to be. The House has 65 members in our caucus. We want to make sure everybody is able to go home with some wins. We look at a budget that's $3.5 billion, and we think that the legislature should have a decent say in what a big chunk of that budget is. So to be able to and then our members really worked well with their senators. I think that is a real storyline out of this budget is, there was an awful lot of overlap in terms of what a House member submitted and what the senator submitted. And so when the House and the Senate agrees, that project's getting funded. We had fewer issues where, the chambers were vastly apart. We were really talking more about the amount than what projects we were going to fund. And that, I think that really speaks to the collaboration we've had this term.
Absolutely. I want to move on. This capital budget marked the first time community project funding was split 50-50 between urban and rural areas. Rep. Stewart, Mr. Speaker, what does that mean exactly? How is this different than how we've done this in the past?
Well, so this is, I guess, my ninth capital budget, although I shouldn't say that's my ninth General Assembly. There were at least one, maybe 2 years in the early teens where there was certainly there were no community projects. But essentially, everybody comes up with a formula. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in law. And the formula, at least back in 2008, was, well, we're going to give a third of this budget to the three largest counties, a third of it to the next three largest counties, or four, and the remainder third is split among the other 82 counties. And if you just do the math on that population-wise, it doesn't add up. And essentially, now you can look at the math, but essentially the 10 or 12 largest counties in Ohio are about half the population. And the difficulty for smaller counties, from really small counties like Noble County to kind of small counties like Allen County or other counties that are 100,000, is accumulating enough local dollars to put in with these plans. And the other fact here is that the larger counties already get a large share of the other parts of the capital budget. So Ohio State University, obviously in Franklin County, and University of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, they're getting huge builds at their universities and the higher education portion of the budget, and many other similar spending projects that aren't necessarily, art projects, a whole number of things like that. So what we tried to do is say, there is another Ohio out there, and why don't we look at that 50% of the population who's just not in a position to benefit from all the other things that the state of Ohio does in these larger counties. So we try to recognize that, and I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. In addition to passing the capital budget, Rep. Stewart, the House also advanced legislation addressing Ohio's projected $1.5 billion budget surplus. I know that the word surplus is usually a good word when we're talking about budgeting. So kind of just explain what the legislation does and how these funds are going to be used.
Well, I'll let the speaker get into some of the finer details because he's been heavily involved in kind of negotiating what these pots are. But I would say in general, we started out from a standpoint where we said we want to give this money back to Ohioans to the greatest amount that we can. And I think the House was very interested in doing, a sales tax holiday. We've had that in the statute. We're going to expand that in this bill. I think the Senate, both chambers wanted to see property tax relief, and so you're going to see that in this bill as well. And then we're trying to practice what we preach and be fiscally conservative as well. And so you're going to see some money put into our rainy day fund. We're going to fund that at the highest level we have to this point. So we're heading into the next biennium on a really sound financial footing. We're saving some money for the rainy day. We know that there's some things in the federal legislation, the big beautiful bill, that may have some challenges for us in the next budget. And we're going to save some money. We're not going to just spend every dollar and start out the next budget, looking at a deficit. So we're going to prioritize an awful lot of relief to Ohioans and also make sure that our fiscal house is in order. And I think the speaker's done a really good job sort of weighting that towards helping everyday Ohioans.
Yeah. So, what the saying goes, budgets are not fact, they're opinion. And the reason when we pass a budget, and in this case, we pass a budget that last 2 years that's ending June 30th of 2026, is we think here's how much money we're going to have, and we think this is how much money we're going to spend. Neither of those numbers ever turn out to be exactly true. Sometimes the cost of programs is way up, sometimes it's down. Sometimes revenue is, changes also. So we sometimes get to the point where at the end of the 2-year period where there is more money in the coffers than what we anticipated after we've paid our expenses. Now, if you're in Washington, D.C., none of that makes any difference because they spend without regard to what their revenue is, and then they just borrow extra that they don't have. That's why Ohio has a AAA bond rating and the federal government does not. So, the estimate, and again, these are estimates because, here in June, people are still buying things and paying sales tax and doing a number of other things. But the estimate is that we'll have an excess or surplus of $1.5 billion. So I think Brian generally described the concept is, look, let's give as much money back. Let's do some things that we think are fiscally conservative. Let's give money back in taxes and so talk about first about the sales tax holiday. So this was put into place a few years ago in a budget that said get to the end of June, whatever money we have, we'll have a sales tax holiday in August. And we would have had a sales tax holiday for several weeks in August of 26, except during the time we were doing our real estate tax stuff, many of the public schools said, well, gee, if you do that, we don't have time to prepare for that, so we're going to lose a lot of money. So we took several $100 million out of the sales tax holiday fund and gave it to the schools. This is going to set aside several $100 million to put in a sales tax holiday, which we are declaring for 15 days in August. So anybody who buys something less than $500 in the month of August, first 15 days in August, this, of course, is good because people aren't paying as much in taxes, but it's also great for the folks who are selling things in Ohio. And so that money is reserved to make sure that to pay for, so to speak, the money. I should also add that the money will also be used to reimburse local governments of their sales tax, so that local governments still get their money. And I think it's a great thing. Most everybody buys something or has somebody buy something for them. There also is a real estate tax pay back to folks on the homestead exemption, which is going to be significant. That'll come in January of 27. There's a certain amount of money put in, somewhere between $475 and $500 as a credit on homestead exemption taxes. I've often told people who ask for my financial counseling, if you could not borrow money to pay for something, don't borrow money if you have the cash. And that's almost always good advice. In this case, we are using cash to pay for the $200 million of community projects that the various legislators. So we're not going to borrow that money. We have the cash. Why go borrow, pay interest on bonds and things like that? We're going to pay that directly out. We also don't want to start July 1st with zero in the checking account. So there's some of this money is reserved to sort of start off the next year. And so I think this is a recognition of, we want to make sure that we're fiscally sound. The other money we want to give back in taxes. I finally would add that one of the reasons we have this is a number of steps that have been taken through the years. One of those is flattening out the income tax. And as people who object to that, as the taxes go lower, the rate goes lower, say, well, how are we going to pay for that? Well, the answer is flat, low income tax rates actually produce more revenue for the government because it generates economic activity. People aren't saying, wow, I'm going to pay 9% income tax, pile that on with my local and my Fed. Why am I working that hard to give it all to the government? So these various things that we've done over the last 15 years or so we're now benefiting from it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for explaining that. I want to ask if you could summarize kind of the impact of the capital budget in one final message to Ohioans. What would it be?
I think this is a state investing in every community across the state in the things that people love about living in Ohio and the things that help us attract people who are considering coming to Ohio. You have massive projects in the metros. You got smaller projects in the rural counties. We're investing in behavioral health for our children who were sending out of state today because they need to get help elsewhere. We're going to keep those folks in the state by building a children's hospital facility right here in Central Ohio, investing in parks, investing in entertainment, investing in fairgrounds, all the things that people that make life kind of worth living. And I think that our members have done a really good job. They have got a really good hand on the pulse of their community, and there is going to be wins that people are excited about in literally every county in the state.
I don't think I can do better than that.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, that was really good.
Speaker Huffman, Representative Stewart, thank you so much for coming on again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Olivia.
Enjoyed it.
Quickly want to talk about our social media. You can follow us on the Ohio House GOP Caucus on Facebook, Ohio House _GOP on Instagram, and OHR GOP Caucus on Twitter. You can subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks.